Welcome to the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. I am your host, Chad Hufford, and this is the podcast where we celebrate the unsung heroes of the working world. Each week, we dive into the incredible stories of honest, hardworking folks who have found financial success through grit, determination, and good old-fashioned elbow grease. So if you're ready to be inspired and learn how to turn your hard work into your own success story, you're in the right place. This is the Blue Collar Millionaire Show.
Okay, so I wanted to sit down and talk with you, Chad, about a book. One thing about me, I can get really engrossed in a good book, but I don't read a ton. And I'd love to say that that's because I'm just such a discerning person, and maybe there's a little bit of that. Some of it's laziness. I go through a lot of books here, and it takes a lot for me to be impressed by a book. I don't have much tolerance for just an average book that's spouting average ideas. We do a book club here at work, and I've been blessed to be around some pretty incredible content. And I wanted to take some time and talk through your book, Forging Financial Freedom. I'll be honest, and I'm just, you're always going to get authenticity with me. It's awesome that you wrote a book. It's awesome that you went to the level to get it published and then be an Amazon bestseller. Like, all that's incredible. None of that makes it a good book, right? None of that makes it interesting or powerful.
Somebody who reads a lot, I can tell you there's a lot of garbage books that get published.
Yeah, I mean, you did the things that you could control to get it published, but it also is a really powerful book. And I wouldn't ask to take an episode talking just about a chapter in the book if I didn't love it. So I wanted to take this time and really talk through it. We're going to start at the very first chapter, which is Dare to Be Different. Kind of an obvious place to start, right? The very first phrase that stands out to me, though, I'm just going to dive right in. You talk about, we are not wired for investing in good financial habits. That's a pretty powerful thing to say, that we as humans are not wired to make good financial decisions. And there's part of me that's like, man, like I could see the pushback on that. There's people that make good financial decisions, right? So what do you mean by that we're not wired for it?
Our wetware, the wiring in our brain is designed to get us to survive the day, not to thrive in the future. So when you think about human civilization 5,000 years ago, they weren't worried about 20, 30 years down the road. They weren't worried about 20, 30 days down the road. They were worried, man, am I gonna be able to find something to eat? That rustling in the bushes, is that a rabbit and maybe a meal for me, or is that a lion and maybe I'm the meal?
There's a lot of fear.
We're wired to overreact to a potential loss rather than to pursue a gain. And we also have a really hard time looking past a temporary cost or a temporary difficulty or hardship for a long-term benefit. Yeah. And what we call investments, you're giving your money to your future self.
Right.
If you don't have the right mindset, that doesn't feel like an investment. It feels like a cost. It feels like a line item in your budget.
I'm paying a bill.
Just one more thing going out the door. And it takes, and there's so many examples of this financially. Think about debt. Like we buy something that we don't need to impress somebody that we don't even like with money we don't have, but it's almost like it's somebody else's problem to deal with it. Like, I'm going to buy this TV now because there's a Super Bowl party but future me is going to have to pay for it. Future me is going to have to figure that out. Those types of things, like Amazon, whatever, not to pay on Amazon, but Costco, like our whole commerce is geared towards intensifying that instant gratification. We have to work against that. That is how we are wired for temporary pleasure, and swap that for long-term fulfillment.
Okay, so you started to allude to this, and it's part of your chapters, temporal discounting.
Yes.
I love the example you give of Seinfeld with his bit of, was it morning guy versus night guy, right? And I don't think you're familiar with this show. You might enjoy it, but for anyone familiar with the show Severance, it's a really popular show over the last couple of years. And a huge piece of that show, it's a little bit of a it's kind of it's a modern day Twilight Zone in a way. And it's a dramatization of a lot of things, but a big part of it is people can have this certain kind of brain surgery where they literally have work mode and then they have non-work mode. And it's a really, really interesting show, really enjoy it. But I've thought about your book as I've watched that show, and it's a really, really powerful look at, I mean, there's tons of stuff. Honestly, we could do a few episodes just talking about that. But literally, society treats work mode as a different human than the non-work mode. That person treats their work mode literally as a slave, as an indentured servant. And it's a wild look, and yet we do that, right? I do that if I choose to stay up late and eat a bowl of ice cream and watch a movie, knowing that it feels good right now, and I'm not going to feel better tomorrow morning. I'm going to feel kind of yucky, but I'm just going to do it.
Well, you mentioned temporal discounting, and just explain what that is for people that haven't heard it. What it means is you put more emphasis and more importance on the moment than the future, and you discount the benefit of future things. Again, it's like you're with an investment, or if you're trying to pay off debt, you're working now to benefit the life of somebody you've never met, future you. You don't know that person, you never met that person, you don't even know if you're going to like them. But you're going to lay in a bed of those consequences at some point. And with the morning guy, nighttime guy, the Seinfeld routine, to realize that that episode probably aired 30 years ago. But the idea is that there's nighttime guy, and he stays up late, he drinks too much, he spends too much money, and then the next morning guy has to pay for it. So we struggle to make decisions where just a few hours from now, we're gonna have to pay those consequences. But financially speaking, we have to push that into the future, not just to benefit not the future version of ourselves tomorrow, but 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years out in the future. And it's very, very difficult to do that. And we also have to push against the norm of society, because we're living in a culture that is so focused on the moment, so much about instant gratification, that we have become the most in debt, obese, over-medicated society that's ever existed on this planet, and that's normal. It's normal to be broke at 65. It's normal to live on Social Security as your primary source of income. It's normal to be in debt for the rest of your life, to have credit card debt even when you retire. It's normal to have tens of thousands of dollars worth of student loans and graduate with a degree you can't even use. All those things are normal. So daring to be different means we cannot do the same things everybody else is doing unless we're willing to accept the results that everybody else is getting, and those results are pretty dire.
Right. I mean, honestly, one of the biggest things that comes to mind when you're talking is, I spent 10 and a half years in the car business, right? And I, none of this is me blaming other people or saying like, I was right there in the thick of, I wanted the new car, I bought the new car, I traded the new car for a newer car, and rolled over the negative equity and everything. And so I very much know what it is to be on that side of the fence of like, I want what my boss has, I want what my coworker has, I want what my customer just buy. I want a nicer car than them, or at least as nice, and I'll take the debt to carry along with that. And yet there's a very specific memory I have of, this was 10 years into my time in the car business, where one of those vehicles that I had bought that was not a good decision at the time, but I've kept it, and so it's at this point 13-year-old car, right? I bought it over a decade ago, and I've now got almost 250,000 miles on the thing, right? Well, a few years ago, right before I came over here, still working at a dealership, and one of my coworkers was giving me a hard time. He's like, "Man, you're still driving that car. He's like, "How many miles do you have on it?" And I don't remember how many I had at that point, but I was already well into six figures on the odometer. And I didn't even say this to him, but I remember having this thought in the back of my head. I no longer had feeling of shame or embarrassment, and there was a big reason why. Because what had been a big car note to Denali FCU, now I had the title in the kitchen. I had the title to the car. So yeah, it had well over 100,000 miles. It wasn't the sexiest car. You know, it doesn't get up and go the way that it used to when I first bought it. But I got the title. That doesn't make me better than anyone else. That doesn't make that car better. But it made me feel so different because now I'm not comparing it to somebody else's car. I'm comparing it to, would I rather have a huge car payment or no car payment?
And I think if, going back to daring to be different, if the norm is to be enslaved by debt, if the norm is to live paycheck to paycheck, if the norm is to check your 401k every single day and cross your fingers and hope that it didn't go down a couple percentage points, which by the way happens all the time, it's not something to freak out about. But like all those things are the norm. People worry about those things, and when that is your day to day, you don't realize you're enslaved to those things,
right? Because
you haven't experienced the freedom of like, you know what, those declines are just temporary. I'm not going to worry about it. The advance is permanent. Or I don't care about what anybody else is driving because I don't have a car payment coming out. And eventually, we hope people get to the point, they don't even have a mortgage payment coming out.
Right.
Yeah, your neighbors might have a bigger house, they might have a greener lawn, they might have whatever, nicer cars in the driveway, but if you don't have a payment coming out at the beginning of the month, that's a feeling you can't put a dollar amount on. But you have to get past the rat race of doing everything that everybody else is doing. And I mean, you and I know what growing up different looks like. You know, growing up homeschooled in the 80s and for you the 90s, I actually think it's become a little bit of a superpower where nobody was homeschooled back then. When we grew up, mom made our own clothes. You might not remember all of these, but like, remember going through the airport, we're all wearing these horrible matching horizontal striped shirts.
I skipped that part of the book at first because it was too triggering. I didn't want to bring it up, but now you brought it up. So
no, it's like we looked like we were going to a Where's Waldo convention, and it was bad enough that mom made her own clothes, but the fact that they matched, and I mean, we grew up in such a weird time. Like there was only geeks and freaks were homeschooled back then.
Right.
And we probably fit into both categories. But it gave me a little bit thicker skin where I'm not saying I don't feel peer pressure, I do, but it's been easier for me to accept. I'm less concerned what everybody else is doing, and I'm more concerned what actually gets the job done.
Well, and I do want to push back on that a little bit I think for the benefit of people listening, because I've known you my whole life, right? We're brothers. You are very, very driven. You have chosen to be extremely disciplined for as long as I've ever known you. And in some ways, I think I can struggle even to relate to you. I think some folks can struggle to relate to somebody that's so driven because it's like, man, you just have it all figured out, or you were just born that way. And I know that you weren't. You've put things in place. What I'm getting to though is, I think there's part of us, generally speaking, as humans, that even as I get healthier and I work hard to set up good boundaries and have a good worldview, there's still that part of me that's going to compare, that's going to want to. And James Clear, I'm going to butcher the quote, so I'm not going to try to quote it, but he's got the idea that comes up throughout his books and all of his content about surround yourself with people who have basically what they want in life is what you want in life, and that's something healthy. And so I think what that gets down to is we're still going to compare more than likely at some level, but now we're comparing with somebody that's also choosing the healthier option. Since I've come over at Veritas, most people do not buy lunch, right? We're not ordering burgers out. We're not ordering pizzas out. So there's absolutely peer pressure here. If I were to go get McDonald's, which is right, next door, and I've done it, but
there's a moose in the drive-thru this morning, by the way. I don't know what he was ordering.
Well, that's good. That deters people.
Yeah.
But like when I've done that, dude, I felt shame. I felt embarrassment, and like that's a good thing. That's because that's peer pressure.
I'm a
still,
little ashamed of you. No, I'm kidding.
And yet it's peer pressure that's leading me to a healthier choice. So I hope that can be helpful for people. It's not like we have to get to a point where we don't ever feel peer pressure. but choose your peer pressure.
Yeah, and this is the same goes when we talk about later in the book, talking about being resilient in the midst of uncertainty and volatility. You will feel the fear. I'm not trying to create robots here.
Right.
It's acting on the feeling. And in this case, you will still feel peer pressure, but it's not acting on the peer pressure. And I think too often we give way too much credence to feelings and motivation rather than commitment. So it's committing to be on this path. It's committing to be a tortoise in a world full of hares, where the hares will chase this distraction and this hot new thing and this idea and go out and buy the thing, the latest, greatest iPhone, whatever it is. It's seeing that and be like, man, that would be cool in the moment, but there's a better choice. There's a better pathway in front of me. And you will still feel the peer pressure. I don't think that ever goes away. But it's choosing to commit to that path even when you're not motivated to do that. And I think that's the real difference between people who are quote unquote normal and people who are truly committed to their future, is they're able to step beyond their feelings and say, I feel like the bowl of ice cream. I feel like spending that money on going out to dinner instead of putting it in my 401k or putting it towards my mortgage, whatever. And recognizing, yeah, that's my feeling.
Right.
But what is best for my life is actually a different choice.
Right. Where do you still struggle, even if it's a small area or kind of a goofy area, where do you still struggle maybe with some unhealthy peer pressuring and comparison?
I think in all the ways that most people do. I mean, it could be driving by, a nice neighborhood and seeing a feature of somebody's house and be like, oh, it'd be cool if we had that. It's actually a really good question. Let me think through that. I
know you struggle when you go through the JCPenney catalogs and you see the matching clothes that are available now that we just didn't have back then.
Yeah, I wish we matched more.
Because now you can go horizontal stripes, you can go vertical stripes, you can do checkers. So if mom's listening, she can buy new outfits.
Don't, because she might whip out the sewing machine and not just make us wear matching clothes again, but do family pictures, which I think matching clothes is probably why family pictures still trigger me.
That's true.
No, so when you talk about like discipline and things like that, like I wasn't born this way. It was a discipline, and we talk about that more in the book too, is a muscle that you must build. And I don't know if you know this, Logan, but when I was like 12 years old, I actually let the air out of mom's tires to avoid going to football practice because I didn't want to do the work. It was too hard. It was too much exercise, which is, for those who know me, probably a crazy thing to think about right now.
I did not know that.
But I sabotaged mom's car to avoid getting out of football practice. And she still drove me on half flat tires. And what was interesting is we had an event planned the next day. It was like homeschool gym, which sounds as nerdy as it is. And they were completely flat by then. So I actually still had to go to practice, but missed the thing that I wanted to do. But I guess I have all the same emotions. I struggle with all the same. I don't have it all figured out. But it's choosing a higher standard. It's daring to be different.
Right.
That really is the thing. And saying that regardless of what I feel, regardless of what this world is doing around me, that I am choosing a different path. Not because it's different. This isn't how people misuse the term ironic. I'm being ironic. No, I'm not being different just because it's different. I'm seeing the world around us and realizing it doesn't work. I'm seeing how people manage money. I'm seeing how people invest. I'm seeing how professionals invest other people's money. And if the way everybody did things worked, we wouldn't have the financial issues we have in this country. So it was very early in my career saying there's gotta be a different way to do this, because I saw everything that was happening and I realized it was not working. And more than it wasn't working, it was actually a detriment to many people. We were working against people. And there's a lot more in the book that we unpack about the misconceptions, about risk, and about how you invest, about what conservative looks like. But I wanted to preface that and lay a foundation with, in order to get different results, you have to do things that might seem a little abnormal. It might feel a little bit weird, but in a world where being normal is being broke and riddled with anxiety and frustrated about money and probably with higher blood sugar and higher blood pressure than you should have, if that's normal, then it's okay to be weird.
No, I mean, normal, and you don't have to go outside of, a family event or a Christmas dinner or just, just hanging out with friends. And I've got people that I love, that I care about deeply, where it's normal to just be crabby and just vent and just not get along, and that's just how that's how you go through life. Because if I'm buried in debt, if I've got all sorts of issues that I'm just totally ignoring, I've got issues too, but not ignoring them, right, is the key, and that's normal, right? So choosing to be different from the unhealthy, and then seeing healthy aspects and absolutely modeling those, not trying to be different from that, right? But choosing what I'm modeling after, not in what I'm even conforming to maybe, but then what am I being different from is huge. So take a couple minutes and I know I zoomed like right into the chapter here, but for anyone who's not familiar with the book, it's right on the very first page as you start to dive in on the back of the book. It talks about you've got a heart for the oil field worker, the tradesman, the tradeswoman, the person that is literally the show, the blue collar person, especially if they're not a millionaire yet, right? What is it about that industry, especially if it's an oil field worker, that we interviewed a ton of them for this book to get what's worked, what hasn't worked. Why have you chosen to really zero in on that for this book?
Well, I think the oil field has a tendency to exaggerate the struggles and obstacles that most people deal with when trying to plan for the future. One of the interviewees told me, how do you expect me to plan for 20 years from now if the price of oil shifts, I don't have a job 20 days from now,
right?
And that mentality, it's how do you stay on a budget when 2 weeks out of the month you're up at work working 12, 14 hours, you don't have a chance to spend any money, then you come to town, you got nothing but free time. It's almost like you're living two different lives. How do you stay on a budget? I could go on and on, but there's a tendency for that lifestyle, and also, let's say, tendency for that lifestyle to again aggravate the frustrations with planning for the future. But also, some of these folks we work with, whether law enforcement, oil field, even physicians, there are some high burnout industries where we want people to be able to experience financial freedom early in life. Not necessarily retire. We got a whole chapter on rethinking retirement too, but maybe you don't do this for 40 years. Maybe you do it for a little while and you switch to a career that doesn't make maybe a fraction of the money, but gives you much more autonomy, and it's
you've got some financial agency.
It's something that you can maybe transition into more of a retirement work optional life. But also too, I don't care what industry you're in, there's comfort in the crowd, and it's calling that out a little bit. And a lot of times people would be more willing to go the wrong direction in the midst of a crowd than to stand alone on the right path.
Right.
And it's trying to calling out that courage, and it is courage. I don't think that's too strong of a word. There's a lot of fear in being singled out about being different, but whatever industry you're in, you're going to come up against all these same things we talk about. It's not just in the oil industry.
Right.
The negative influences are all around us, and to your point, Logan, we don't need to change the entire culture. We just need a handful of people around us to be in that journey with us, and that's a big part of what Veritas offers, is that camaraderie, whether connecting you with other people, other clients in your peer group, or connecting with us. You have a team behind you, we're doing this together. We're being weird, we're being different together. And that's really the powerful part of this book, is that being different, the being weird, doing things that are against the grain is really kind of seasoned through every single chapter, and it's what we do different every single day, because we want something better for people, not the results that everybody else is getting.
Right. So we're going to have some more episodes where we break down future chapters, and there's going to be that common thread of recognizing if I'm choosing to be different, if I'm daring to be different and doing the healthy thing, yes, it takes courage, but I'm not the only person that's doing it. There's other people, as you said, our clients get to see that. Interviewing people for this book, we got to see that. And it's cool to have these conversations, and so that other folks can see, I'm being different, but I'm not the only person that's trying to avoid debt. I'm not the only person that is willing to stick it out for the long run. There are other folks that are part of this community.
And it works. You asked, why interview all these people? To use real life men and women. These aren't just theories. This stuff actually works. It's been proven out over years and decades where life transformation has happened, and be able to show people that there is a huge payoff at the end of this if they're willing to dare to be different.
Thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. We hope this episode has been inspiring and beneficial to you. If you want help on your journey to financial freedom, reach out to us at veritasalaska.com. We'd love to sit down over a cup of coffee with you, either here in our office or virtually, and get to know you and your needs. And though this podcast is free of charge, we do ask that you please do us 2 quick favors. If you enjoyed the episode, give our pod a great rating on iTunes or whatever podcast platform you use, and also give us a follow on Instagram. We hope you have a wonderful day filled with gratitude and intentionality. God bless.